All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. It is 9:01. Welcome to Palen Music Center's Virtual Breakfast Club. This is our 12th session, and we have two wonderful guests with us today. We've got Stephen Davis from the University of Missouri, Kansas City. We've got Jerry Junkin from University of Texas at Arlington and Dallas Winds. They are here to answer all kinds of questions about conducting for you all, and hopefully this will be just an eye-opening experience for you, get some insight into these two wonderful musicians and two wonderful educators' minds, and hopefully you'll take away something that will brighten your day and will increase your craft. My name is Mike Steffen. I'm an educational representative for Palen Music Center. Palen Music is based out of Springfield, Missouri, right here in the center of the country. We have 8 locations in Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. I'm actually out of the Kansas City area location, our Liberty store. And these sessions have grown out of a brainstorm just to see how we can help directors during this time. I am looking around at so many smiling faces that I know you're happy to see others, you're happy to connect with others, and that's kind of what we're all longing for right now. So the topics that we have hosted over the past month, there have been about 40 of them altogether. Topics have ranged from movie trivia to best practices in the virtual online classroom to bass methods. Oh my gosh, so many different things. We've learned how to do TikTok better. We've learned how to make virtual ensembles. Yeah, it's been a really good time for this. So I know that some of you are feeling down right now. I know some of you are feeling energized right now. But just remember that whatever you're doing for your students is the right thing. And you sharing your heart with them through the internet is more important than what curriculum you're doing with them, more important than how often you're seeing them. Just make sure that you're continuing to reach out to those guys and gals and making them feel welcome and loved. So, all right, you're not on here to hear me talk. You're here to hear these wonderful guys talk. So I'm going to be guiding things with the questions that you have submitted ahead of time. If you have some additional questions that come up, please feel free to text them or email or send them to me in the chat. Did I say Arlington, Joe? Excuse me, Texas Austin for Jerry. Did I say Arlington? My apologies. So University of Texas Austin. Joe Parisi just corrected me there. Thanks, Joe. So anyway, I'm not sure if we'll be able to get to additional questions because we had about 45 submitted ahead of time, but we will do our very best. This could run from an hour to an hour and a half. So if you need to get up and walk around and leave your headphones on, feel free to do so. We will not be offended. All right, so let me let our two guests introduce themselves a little bit and let you know who they are, and then we'll get started with our questions. Steve, why don't you take the first chance to introduce yourself here?
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone is doing beautifully. That's the first thing. Second thing I want to say is it's not lost on me that you could be doing anything else. So thanks for taking some time out of your life to join us. A little bit about me, I'll go briefly. I'm the director of bands at the University of Missouri, Kansas City Conservatory. I live in Kansas City. I wear 2 other hats regularly. I'm the conductor of the symphony orchestra of the Youth Symphony of Kansas City, and I'm also the coordinator of the band program at the Interlochen Arts Summer Camp. So those are the 3 hats I wear. Just for purposes of information that people may not know, my career started in a middle school job. I then moved into a high school job. And then for the last 20 years, I've been teaching university. So that's enough about me. Jerry?
Yeah, also good morning, everyone. Great to know that there are this many people interested in what we may or may not have to say at this hour. So at any rate, hope everyone is doing well and staying inside and washing your hands and doing all the stuff that we're supposed to all be doing right now. I am at the University of Texas at Austin, where I have been now for 31 years, which seems ridiculous. You know, it's just flown by like that. My father was a high school band director. I grew up, you know, I was going to band concerts in the womb. And so it's just something that, you know, has always been a part of me. I got my degrees from where I'm teaching now at UT Austin. And then by a quirk, that was also where I had my first job. When I finished my master's degree, I was the assistant marching band director and taught some other classes at UT for 3 years. So I never taught in the public schools, even though that was my goal. So it just worked out a different way. I went to Michigan, I went there to get a doctorate, and then it turned out, again, being in the right place at the right time, I ended up teaching there. I was on the faculty instead for 2 years before going to Florida, being at the University of South Florida for 4 years before the opportunity to come back to Texas in this capacity arrived. And As some of you may know, I'm in now my 26th year as the conductor and music director of the Dallas Winds, formerly the Dallas Wind Symphony. And my 18th season as the music director of the Hong Kong Wind Philharmonia. And for 10 years now, I've been on the faculty of the Senzoku Gakuen College of Music in Tokyo, Japan. So conducting their groups. So at any rate, that's what I do. Married, living here in Austin, have 2 beautiful grandkids, live 20 minutes from us, who we can't see right at the moment. So at any rate, that's my story.
All right. Well, folks, I thought I was getting some big name people, but I guess we'll have to go with these guys instead. Just kidding, guys. Happy to see you both and excited for these questions. First of all, we're going to do some different categories. So our first question is about conducting in general. So here's a question that was submitted. What methods do you use to encourage students to think expressively in a rehearsal? What methods do you use to encourage students to think expressively in a rehearsal? Steve, you want to start?
Sure, and I'll try to finish this within 2 hours. What methods do we use? I mean, I think all methods that we are surrounded by in our life, you know, and it's anything we can do to get the music inside of our minds and inside of our hearts are what we try to do, right? So that encompasses questioning, that encompasses listening a lot. Music's an oral art form that's been passed on from generation to generation, and it's a sound-oriented endeavor. So, I mean, it's really, I think I'm a believer in just observing the world around you and trying to learn and grow from that, and then set up an environment that's positive, that's rigorous, unashamedly rigorous, that's disciplined, unashamedly disciplined, that's passionate, unabashedly passionate, committed. So those are some very, very broad things. Jerry, I'm sure, has something to piggyback on this for sure.
Yeah, over the years, I suppose it's changed and it evolves. So now, basically, it's all I think about. Are the expressive qualities of music, which sounds, I know, really bougie and not helpful in a lot of circumstances. But I think part of it has, the more I've worked with professional players, I have realized that what they are interested in is just about only that. You know, they want to be good, so they have an expectation for themselves that they're going to deal with intonation. They're going to, you know, everybody has ears, but what they want to do is they want to be transported and taken somewhere. And so I am willing to let sometimes technical things slip. I want it to be good too. That's not to say it's not important, but in order to get to the expressive quality of the music, and that has, I think, filtered into the rest of my conducting. So I don't know if that's well said or not, but I know what I meant. I'm not sure it came out the best.
No, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Okay. Jerry, why don't you start with this one? What's your biggest concern with watching younger directors? Maybe some bad habits, not enough visual communication. Speak to that, about some basic things people can fix.
Yeah, people will ask me sometimes, you know, because, and Steve and I both go all over the place doing conducting workshops and working with sometimes younger conductors. And so people will say, okay, so are there any sweeping generalizations, which are good to avoid, but are there any you can make about what you see from at different places? And the answer to that is yes. No one knows their music well enough. That is the kind of overarching thing. So, and you can never know your music well enough. There's always one level deeper to go, but that is the first thing that I notice, and invariably at conducting workshops. And as I was scrolling through the list, I see people who I have worked with before, and you will know, because I say this all the time, I'll ask someone, okay, on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being not at all, and 10 being absolute metaphysical certainty, how well do you know this piece? Invariably, they say 7. And the real answer is 2 or 3, because if you know it at a 7, that means you can almost write it out from memory. You know, I mean, people don't realize the knowledge that you have to know it at that particular level. So it takes a lot of work, but when the work becomes fun, like I love it, you know, so I love to study music. As a matter of fact, right over there is my stack of scores, which I will admit have been largely untouched since May the 6th. You know, but that was going to be the next 3 concerts, you know, so that hadn't happened. So I'll get to them because I have these darn Zoom meetings to go to. But anyway, that's the thing, is that people don't know their music well enough. I'm sure Steve has plenty to say about that.
Good call. Good call.
I would say that's true. And this is going to sound also very pie in the sky, but I think, and I think more of a viewpoint that I'm witnessing with younger conductors is there's a range of expressiveness that could be dramatically increased. So if we're measuring a piece of art, it's the range of expressive possibilities in their body is the size of a postcard. And maybe that's because of fear. Maybe that's because of experience. Maybe that's because not enough observing. Maybe that's because they haven't touched excellence on their instruments. Maybe that's because their ears aren't as profound as they need to be. And I think that's something over, you know, I've been at this now for 28 years, and I'm definitely more learned than I was when I started. So it takes a long time to really grasp these things. But I also think, lastly, more of a vulnerability, which is the esoteric aspect of this. But I sense people, you know, we do this all the time, Jerry and I do, I'm sure, and everyone else will say, how do you feel about this music? And then they move their hands and they move their heart and their face ignites and their heart expands and they become unlocked. And then that goes away as soon as they start conducting meters, right? So that's an expansiveness would be, and a comfort of just putting yourself out there is going to consistently grow, and it's difficult. I often say, I'll say one last thing. I often say the first lesson that should happen in undergraduate conducting class is to go stand in a room for about a minute and a half and have everyone just stare at you and just stand there. And that's what we do, except for 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours when we're on circuits doing all states. We have 14 hours of that. And that's, at some point you have to get over it, right? Or else you're going to be completely non-available for the kids in front of you. And I'll never forget my first rehearsal at the University of Michigan. A guy named Robert Reynolds was in the back of the room with his arms crossed. And I was this younger person. And I remember being tangibly terrified. And then I said, no, I'm not going to be terrified because I'm shutting down and I can't do that for these students. So at some point you have to confront yourself, which is difficult. I'm done.
I just wanted to add one thing, if I might, and this will sound bad also, but I've also realized that when you get right down to it, when you talk about conducting in any way, people conduct about as well as they want to, because being a good conductor takes a lot of work and it's difficult. And we are held back because we're musicians and we spend so much time individually in a practice room on our instrument. And this is the only dexterity that we develop. And so I have actually proven this to people. I've had someone from the athletic department send over just any kind of athlete. One time we had a member of the football team. One time we had a member of the rowing team. We've had different people show up. I spend like 10 minutes with them before a class. They look more like a conductor than our music students do because they are accustomed to moving and using their bodies, which we don't do. So it takes a lot of work for us to be able to do that. And then to translate the emotion that's inside us that comes so easily when we're performing on our instrument into some sort of physical motion. So I'll be quiet now.
Wonderful. No, you're great. So it sounds like you guys are both really highlighting vulnerability and physical control, right? Allowing that vulnerability to translate through your physical motions. Jerry, that's a wonderful story about bringing athletes in and showing your conductors that they are more expressive than the music students are. What a great idea.
Or at least, I don't know, they didn't have any idea what they were doing, but they
Sure.
at least looked more like a conductor, you know.
That's a really wonderful example of educational experience right there. Okay, gentlemen, Steve, I'm going to start with you on this one. What is the balance between, I mean, this is going to tie into what we were just talking about. What is the balance between looking like the music or showing feeling and emotion and becoming so dramatic that you actually get in the way of the performance? How do you balance those out?
I don't think about it. I'm not worrying about being dramatic in a performance. I'm worried about allowing myself to risk at a level of 9.9 how I feel the music should go. And if someone wants to look at me and think I'm too dramatic, I don't care, because what I'm trying to do is be sincere. There's some points in music that is ridiculously tenacious and demonstrative and earth changing. And how can that be? How can our physical motion, if we're trying to convey our innermost thoughts of this and the power that music can resonate with the world, how in the world can we be anything other than committed? I mean, you can go look at conductors of old and you'll see Bernstein, and he was an excessive one. And then you can watch the recordings that people often use of Strauss conducting, and or Furtwängler or Carry On or whomever, and they're very, very different. But what I hope they are, what I pray they are, is honest to the person. If you know me, and I can speak to Jerry a little bit on this too, we're both passionate, extroverted people in certain ways. In certain ways, we're introverts too, but that should be coming out in our conducting. If it's true to me, then it's not too much. If it's not true to me, then it's dishonest, and then it's inappropriate. That's how I would answer that.
Wonderful. Jerry, you have anything to add to that?
I concur. I'll say that one, I think Steve's point is excellent, that he and I don't think have ever talked about this, but basically what I'm just trying to show the ensemble how I feel like this music should go. And I hope that they will play it the way they think I'm conducting it, and somehow those two things meet up. I remember, this is a long time ago, and it's so long ago that sadly people have forgotten, in some cases, the name William Ravelli. But I remember him saying to me one time, as he liked to do you know how to tell the best conductor? Well, you weren't really supposed to guess. You're just supposed to say, no, Dr. Ravelli, how can you tell? And he said, you can tell the best conductor by closing your eyes and listening to the music, and if the music comes through, and in a way, there's a lot of wisdom in that. So whatever the conductor has to do to generate the sound that the conductor is envisioning of the music, so it's a collaboration, I think that's what you want to do. And I remember seeing Mr. Bernstein conduct in person for the first time, even though he had been a hero of mine. I'd never seen him conduct live. But when I did, there was this realization all of a sudden, because people would criticize him, always so flamboyant, but watching him in rehearsal, I realized that it was his music making that was flamboyant. And he was a flamboyant person in personality, so it wasn't his conducting was flamboyant to be flamboyant. Mm-hmm. That wasn't the deal. He was just being genuine in who he was. That's all I'll say about that.
Yeah. So genuine and sincere and vulnerable. Those are words that keep on coming back from both of you. And that's wonderful that I'm hearing a lot of that, and not talk of the ictus and not talk of the prep beat. I mean, we're talking about the human emotion that's involved with this. All right, we're going to move on to the next category that we have, as the conductor is the leader of the ensemble. So first question, how do you as a conductor create an atmosphere of family and a standard of musical excellence, both on and off the podium? How do you as a conductor create an atmosphere of family and a standard of musical excellence, both on and off the podium?
Jerry?
Yeah, I'll say that's I think very important, and that's the way that I like to work, and I think that's highly important. And whether it's with our own groups or whether you're going in and you're a visiting hit and run, clinician, or whether you are conducting an all-state or some sort of festival ensemble, you want to create an environment in which people are compelled by whatever it is, whatever force that's coming from the conductor, to be involved in a really special music making atmosphere. And I'd like to have that established from the beginning. It's like, I've heard people talk about various approaches, and sometimes the word discipline and ensemble discipline comes up. I just don't think you can get mad at people until they know that you love them, so you have to prove that first. And the working together with them to create a special atmosphere is like a really high priority. And I'm not so delicate that I need to be liked by everyone. That's not the purpose of it. It's just that when everyone is having an enjoyable experience, the music making is just better. I don't know if that got away from the topic or not, but that's my first thought on it anyway.
Jerry, does that tie into the fact that they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care?
Oh yeah, I've learned a lot of lessons over my lifetime about that. I can remember in my time at South Florida once, I always thought I was nice. I always thought I was a nice person. But I remember one day walking into my office, and the mailboxes were all in the same place, and there's something in my mailbox, and I pull it out, and someone had put in there a copy of Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
That's perfect.
With no signature, but someone, and they had put a note in there saying, thought you could use this.
Oh my gosh. That's perfect.
So, and I think it's easy sometimes to get so wrapped up that we're not trying to be, from the kick-ass school of band conducting, as Jim Cross used to refer to it. But, we're driven, we're wanting to make the product good, and we lose sight then of the human connection. I think that's something that I have tried ever since that day to keep more at the forward part of my thinking.
Thank you to that person who left the book for you, huh?
Yeah,
all right.
Absolutely. I still have it. It's right over there.
All right, Steve, you want to piggyback on that one?
I'll briefly, because I agree with everything Jerry just said, but I would just say people will ask the question, what's more important to you, the music or the students? And I think it's a silly question, to be honest, because you can't have one without the other. And we all of us watching have given our lives to be teachers. And I hope part of teaching is a student-centered love and care and want. That's why we're doing it. And I hope it's student-centered, and I hope it's nurturing. I hope it's caring. I remember music ed teachers in my upbringing at Florida State, Jim Croft being one of them. They used to always say, praise in public, punitive in private. Rarely do I have to punitive the amazing students at the conservatory because they're disciplined and they're the best and brightest. But, when I was in public schools, I had to do that sometimes. I had to be, had to have conversations with kids, but I try to always start with, are you okay? Why are as a person, what's happening? Are you cool? Is everything okay with you? Because I've noticed that you've been late to 5 rehearsals out of the last 8. I just want to make sure you're okay. And if you start with that and there's a sincerity behind it, then the discipline is unnecessary. And if the intensity is so prevalent and the pacing is excellent, then disciplining becomes a very small part of the equation, because we're in it together. And if you can set up a scenario where they want to be excellent and you're trying to be excellent, then things take care of themselves. That's all I would say.
Wonderful. Okay, guys, next question. And Steve, I think you're starting this one. What are your best tools or methods to address pitch with an ensemble?
The human ear. I think that, I'm not going to go off on a tangent here, although I could. I've never seen a time. Okay, I'm going to start it. I've never seen a time where there's so much technology present in the classroom and so little change that happens. Meaning, so we have a harmony director, we have tuners on every single instrument, we have smiley faces for pitch awareness, yet kids still can't play a pitch 10 times consistently in a row in the same place. So are those things wasted? I'm not saying that they're wasted, but I do think the intensity of usage in them, when we're trying to scaffold from a technological device to an internalization device, which is in between the ears, there's something that's not happening in the transfer. So we have to spend more time transferring it. When we're talking about pitch awareness, the best thing I know for that is, one, when you're training and working with preparing younger ensembles to be able to be aware of tuning discrepancies, great. And we talk more about sense and flat and sharp than any other aspect of music. And that's all great, but it doesn't really mean anything. 8 cents and 38 cents doesn't matter. It's a wrong frequency that we have to learn how to put in the right spot, or else we're wounding our emotional intention. Well, if an 8th grader, if a 9th grader can't put a pitch in the same place 9 or 10 times in a row, then it's chasing a wet dog with soap on it to try to get this pitch accuracy to manifest itself. So early on, I just worked on, when I was teaching younger kids, I just worked on great tone production, great air support, great embouchures, and then playing in the center of the pitch, doing all those things, or playing in the center of the tone. Then pretty soon, pitch starts to get closer. You're not even they're not even aware that you're really working on it. The second thing is, how do we scaffold from these devices to their ears? The only way I know to do that is by singing, or one of the only ways I know is to do that by singing. I think we can sing a lot more. We can sing a scale, we can play a scale. We can sing a B flat, we can play a B flat. When I work with younger ensembles, they sound the A or they sound the B flat, then they hum the A and they hum the B flat because they might be scared to sing initially. Then I move it to an oo syllable. By the way, Anton Armstrong taught me that. If you don't know who Anton is, at St. Olaf, he's one of the leading gurus of choir in the world. When we sing, many bands sing on ah, but all the great choral experts say that oo develops the sound better, and it is more of a holistic embodiment. So we've got to figure out how to get it from the external to the internal more. And the same exact thing I just talked about could be said for metronomic things, which I'm sure we're going to come up to as well. All right, Jerry?
Yeah, no, I agree obviously with everything that Steve said. I think the highest priority is tone quality. Mm-hmm. So if you can't play with a beautiful sound, then you can actually stop a tuner and it just doesn't sound good because the tone quality doesn't match. And that becomes the overriding issue. And then the overtones that the poor tone quality is spinning off. So that's the highest priority. I agree, people need to listen with their ears, not with their eyes. So while I realize there's a reward in getting the smiley face and all that, and that, like anything, it's a tool. If I were teaching in the public schools, I will tell you this, I would learn how to use a harmony director because I don't know how to use it now. And I have seen people use it effectively. When I walk in Texas, I'll have to say every time you do an all region band or something like that, they always have the crash cart up there, you know, next to the podium that has the harmony director and the tuner and the metronome and everything is there on the little trolley. And I always make a big production of looking at it and, you know, then taking off my jacket and laying the jacket over, like they brought that for me to put my jacket on. Cause I don't know how to use it. And I would much rather have time, you know, spent with people listening across the ensemble, but I do get it, why it's helpful. The last thing I'll say about it is that I know band directors on both sides of this equation. And for me, you can recognize their groups instantly when you listen to them. And those are those teachers who are extraordinarily well organized, but for whom there's an intonation part of rehearsal, there's a rhythmic precision part of rehearsal, there is this 20-minute warm-up which is including all these. And then there are the people who conduct and rehearse in such a way that the reason they work on intonation at that particular moment is because it's the intonation that is causing the performance to suffer. And because that's what we have to deal with right now. I would much rather be in that camp because I think it's more effective because the application is then always back to the music and making the music sound the way it's supposed to be. And for the music to sound great, it's got to be in tune.
Very good, guys. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's see. Let's move on to programming. A lot of good questions about programming. This one might be tricky for you. Think about one piece in the literature that you think more conductors should know. Can you narrow it down to one piece that, I mean, that's a real tough one. It's kind of like asking who your favorite kid is or who, you know. What do you think people need to study more? Maybe we'll come back.
I would say that is difficult because I could make a case for saying maybe one of the Beethoven Opus 18 string quartets would be really good for band conductors to know and to listen to.
Okay.
The Mozart Grand Partita, K361, because it's part of our lineage and history and because it's as great as anything in the repertoire. And I think that those kinds of pieces, if you listen to a recording of the Budapest String Quartet playing those Beethoven quartets, then that tells you more about ensemble than listening to any University of Texas Wind Ensemble recording or Dallas Winds or anything like that I could possibly produce on a large repertoire, because that's about chamber music and it's about intent of listening and intent of gesture. So I know I'm avoiding the question because people would like for me to say Lincolnshire Posey or sure, the Hindemith Symphony or pieces like that. And those are all great and everybody should know those. But I don't know that they inform, those are Bandy McBand pieces, you know, as much as I love them, but something that tells us more about what the expressive qualities are of music. We could just name hundreds of pieces. So
yes, understandable.
Think about that while Steve is talking too.
Perfect. Steve, go ahead.
I'm gonna not answer the question the way it's asked. I'm sorry for that. I'm gonna kind of hijack it. But I instead of one piece, I would say try to figure out what the most wonderful pieces are in literally as many different genres as you can find. The best string quartets, the best organ pieces, the best symphonies, the best contemporary modern music ensemble, the best rock band, the best blues band, the best country ensemble, the best rap groups, the best, you know, whatever, indie groups, the best, on and on and on, best jazz musicians, and listen to hear, don't listen to respond. And that's also key. Sometimes I have the students, the grad students at the conservatory go through the first 144 pieces on the Cliff Towner excellent repertoire pieces. And then they get into the second set of listening to the next 200 pieces. And that impacts programming. And we'll get into that in just a little bit, I'm sure. But sometimes someone will listen and they will say, I'll say, hey, go listen to the Schoenberg Chamber Symphony. And they'll come back to me and they might say, if they haven't been exposed to that, it might be a reactive response and say, you know, Professor Davis, I've had graduate students sit in my office and say to me, I can't stand that piece. And that's cool, except I find that when they make a comment like that, it shuts their ears off. And one of the goals that all of us is working on, I think, is if we talk to social psychologists, it's all about living in the now. It's all about being present, right? And so I have worked on this. I'm not great at it, but I am getting better at it. I've tried to change my paradigm, and I said it about a minute ago, listening to hear, not listening to respond. And then what I then ask that student that has to place judgment, as soon as we start placing judgment, we've made a set in stone line in the sand. And sometimes these appendages turn off. So what I ask them to do, if they're wired that way, and many of us are as band directors because we're trained to be and we're prepared to be error detectors. So when we decide that something is not objectively we don't like, or then we start to place lines in the sand. So I tell them, come in next week, listen to these 3 pieces. I don't want any opinion. Opinion's not part of it. I just want you to be able to describe to me, and in the best way that you can, the sounds that you're hearing. And that puts their ears and their mind in a setting that is open, available. Through the description becomes a comfort. Through a comfort becomes an expanding of range for likes. So, and especially in today's music that is, I pray, we'll get to this too, becoming more and more diverse. It's not even close to where we need it, but it is improving, and that's good. And we have to improve faster, I hope. But the diversity of our repertoire is the possibilities are endless. So if you're aware of all these different kinds of excellence in every genre, then you have the ability to have that kinesthetic understanding find itself in your expressiveness on whatever piece you're conducting. So that's how I would answer that question. I know it's long-winded, but it's true. All right, thank you.
No, I think that's excellent. And I agree. And the discussion that I have a lot of time with my graduate conducting students, I think that instinctively all of us react to certain pieces. I don't care for that. Boy, I really like that. But we make a lot of decisions. Most of our decisions as musicians are instinctive, but that's why you have to have really great instincts. You have to have well-informed instincts. So I don't think a conductor has the luxury of making a sweeping generalization and saying, I don't like this genre, because I've heard people say, I like all music. I listen to everything. I hate opera though. I'm not going to listen to opera. Well, then that's exactly what you need to be listening to, or whatever it is. I can remember as a student being assigned my second year, maybe as an undergrad, the Mozart clarinet concerto. And I thought, oh brother, this is the most boring piece ever. But the reason was I just was unfamiliar really with Mozart. And so I can remember in the LP days, just kind of the place where I was living, putting on LPs of Mozart operas, symphonies, whatever, and realizing after a few that this is special music. And I just wasn't comfortable with the medium. So I don't think we want to make those kind of decisions early on and just reject categories of music.
Brilliant. I have 2 things that I want to piggyback on that one. One was a question from somebody saying, can Steve, for those of us who haven't had, conducting master's classes, can you tell us what the Cliff Towner book that you were referring to is? Can you give us the title of that, or the?
Oh, I don't remember the title, but it is a study. There were, I don't remember, 10 to 12 conductors, maybe up to 16, that were asked to, on a Likert scale of 1 to 5, evaluate over 1,600 pieces. I think Jerry and I are both part of that.
Okay.
And that was I'll be frank, but I'm Steve, but I'll be frank. When I got that thing of 1,600 pieces, I started listening to them or trying to find them. Like, oh my God, I don't know this piece. Oh my God, I don't know this piece. I don't know this piece. I don't know this piece. Oh, this one I know. I don't know. And I remember calling Mike Haithcock and saying, Mike, I can't do this study. I don't know 1,000 of these pieces. And in his sage, wise way, and there's truth and jest to this, he goes, Steve, there may be a reason for that. And I said, okay, there's some interest, but I also tried to take it seriously and go through and listen to some of those pieces I didn't know, and it was illuminating to me and helpful. And I found some pieces in there and then we had to rank them on a 1 to 5 level. And then the top 144 pieces are on table 1, and then table 2 and table 3. And if anybody a doctoral student of mine, Andy Putnam, did an analysis on all those 144 pieces, put all kinds of information, publishers, durations, a little bit about the piece, recordings or where they're listed. And we have all that categorized. If someone wants that, I know that Andy would not mind whatsoever if we send that out. And I'm happy to forward that to all of you if you just shoot me an email saying you want it.
Great. We've got a couple of people who have jumped in on the chat, sending us PDF copies of the Towner, sending us as a Google sheet. So I've passed that information on. The official title is an evaluation of compositions for wind band according to specific criteria of serious artistic merit, a second update. So that is the official title. It's coming to you all in chats. Thank you so much for those of you who shared.
It's really a follow-up to the Ostling, the original Acton Ostling study, which was then replicated and updated by Jay Gilbert. And this is like the third iteration of that. And it's really helpful just because all of us forget about pieces, you know, so it's a great reminder.
Absolutely. Steve, Andrew Putnam is on the call and he says, yes, please go ahead and share that. So he would be happy to share the work that he has done. Thank you, Andrew, for that. And again, I will give you Jerry and Steve's email addresses in the chat so that you guys can have access to reach out to them when you get a chance. And when I do the follow-up email, I will, Steve, if you would mind sending that to me, and then I can send that out with the notes when we're done. Is that something we can do?
I'm just going to ask that Andy send that to you, Andy, because I want it, make sure that's your stamp of approval is on it, and then forward that from Andrew.
And Andrew, my contact information is in the chat, so thank you for that. All right, perfect. I got sidetracked with that. Let me get back to our questions here. Okay, so based on this is kind of dovetailing into the new and the old and the best pieces and so on and so forth. How do you balance the standard literature with the new repertoire when you are programming? I mean, that's probably a question you guys get 100 times a year. Jerry, you want to start with that one?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's important. I attempt to, it's more important for my UT group because I feel like there are undergrad students and people always assume, oh, well, they're all graduate. No, they're not. I mean, it's at least half, maybe more than that, undergrads, some freshmen. Timing is everything. So the lawn service guys are here. So you may be getting a lot of noise. I'll try to turn the mic here. But I think I'm trying to think of what the best way to say it is. I do try to, the cornerstone works, the Lincolnshire Posies, the Hindemith Symphonies, those pieces that we would all agree, every student should know, even though they may not themselves ever conduct those pieces. If they're going to be middle school band directors, that's what they aspire to. That's where they're going to teach, make their career. Nonetheless, I think you have to know those pieces, if you're going to be in the band medium. So I want to have covered within a 4-year period, a lot of those pieces, but then the rest of it, programming is like the most important thing we do. It doesn't matter what level you're teaching. So the music has to be good, so putting together interesting programs, I love it. I have a love-hate relationship with it because I love it, but it's agonizing sometimes to get the balance. You don't want to have too much difficult music on a program all at the same time so that people can't possibly make expressive choices that they're so consumed with the technique. But yet on the other hand, there has to be some kind of challenges. So you're balancing all those things. How many at a university, Steve and I have to deal with this. Okay, so are there going to be concerts where there's a guest artist? Are there going to be concerts where we're featuring a faculty colleague? If you have a composition program, is there a faculty composer whose work you need to perform? Is there a student composer whose work wins a prize and so you need to play that? Your graduate students all need to have opportunities to conduct. So over the course of a season, how many pieces do we conduct that are the pieces that we really want to conduct? And the answer to that is not very many sometimes, because you're answering a lot of different calls. With the Dallas Winds, it's different. What I've learned with that audience, because that's subscribers, patrons who are paying, in some cases a lot to come to a concert. I can perform anything with the Dallas Winds. We've done Coriano Circus Maximus. We've done the Schwantner pieces. We've done, whatever. However, I do have to wrap them a little differently with those audiences and set them up a little bit differently. At an academic institution like UMKC or UT, we can play whatever we want, whatever weird concert, have people sit around on rugs at midnight and play stuff. And if it runs everybody off, we can rebuild our audience over the next couple of, months, whatever. It'll be fine. In Dallas, if I were to do that and I ran people off, that would end the group, potentially. So every place you go, it's a little bit different. So the programming, I think programming for honor bands is like super important. And, the focus for me in an honor band are the students, man. I want to do something that at the end of that concert, there's going to be a rush because of the audience reaction, because of the experience that the students had had. So, you know, every situation has a little bit different formula to it. But to answer the original question, yeah, I think there has to be a balance. I'll just say this one thing, then I'll shut up. I've only had one meeting for this last rotation of the wind ensemble because our students, like everywhere else, they're traumatized. They're trying to keep up, you know. So the only assignment was to just fill out a 2-question survey. I wanted to know how they were and what music they were listening to. And the other question was, looking back on your time at UT, however long that's been, what has been your most memorable ensemble experience? And of the 77 respondents to this, there, you know, you can imagine there was a wide range, but there were, like, what I realized, there were like 3 moments that people hit on, that there was a great deal of unanimity about those 3 things. And one of them was performing John Coriano's Mr. Tambourine Man with Hila Plittman, which is not exactly standard repertoire. Even orchestras don't perform that piece. You know, it doesn't get performed that much. But yet, for whatever reason, and I'm sure a lot of it had to do with the guest artist and the music itself, that piece resonated with a lot of our students more than the Hindemith Symphony, which we had done, and Lincolnshire Posy, which we had done. So I'm certainly glad I didn't eliminate that in favor of doing more standard repertoire, because that's an experience that, for whatever reason, resonated with people in a major way. I'll be quiet now and turn off my mic.
Jerry, I love that you first asked them how they were doing. I love that, you know, that everybody at all levels, and the people, I've been doing so many of these sessions, and my middle school directors and collegiate people and everybody in between, and they're just saying, how are you? And that's so important.
It is important right now.
It's great to hear. Steve, how about you?
How do we balance the question, right? I forgot.
Yeah.
That's what the question
sure.
is.
How do you balance new and standard rep?
You know, a year ago, we were about to have, maybe 2 years ago, we were about to have some applicants for the graduate degree show up on campus to conduct, and a part of their audition. And I asked the Wind Symphony, how many of you have played Lincolnshire Posy? And we had about 65 people in the room that I had put on that piece. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but I do remember that it was less than 15. And these were mostly master's and doctoral students. So they'd been playing their instrument in ensembles for 15, 16 years. And then I said, would you want to perform it? Raise your hand if you'd like for us to program this. And every hand went up. So I programmed it. Because I think historically it's an important piece. I think there are several pieces that are historically important. So you take that Towner list and you look at those pieces and you try to whittle it down, and you try to make sure that the student's diet is not vapid of things written from the past. It doesn't have to only be written in the last 10 years. Pause. The other side of that equation is, if we're evolving, if we're developing, if we're replicating the world that all of us want to see, the repertoire for tomorrow should not, if we're evolved and evolving, probably should not look like the music of 100 years ago. So in our jobs as programmers, there's no task that I take more seriously than that. And I think about the diet from yesterday that I believe they need to have exposure to. I think about the music of today that might be, as Jerry mentioned, their peers in the conservatory writing a piece for our composition as part of our composition program, or where, you know, I got an email yesterday from someone asking if I would join a consortia, and it was squarely aligned with how I would like to see the world evolve. So my answer was 100% absolutely. I said, anytime this organization has a piece they want to put forward, count us in. And that's, what is it? Think globally, act locally. that's the things that we have ability to change from our positions of our professional positions. And I want to make sure that I'm squarely in the middle of an evolving world. So I work towards that. It's never perfect. As Jerry said, we have a lot of forced fun on us, charity winners, graduate conductors. So that's, those are the easiest programming things. But what's difficult is programming around those. So, you know, I look at our graduate students at the conservatory. I'm going to give you a pragmatic portion of programming. Many of them are asked to sub in the Kansas City Symphony or Topeka or Wichita or all the orchestras around the region. And usually, not always, the entry into that professional ensemble is through a pops concert. That's usually the way, or a holiday concert, or a movie program with the Kansas City Symphony. That's generally how they're asked to, that's what their first experience becomes. And then I start to think, okay, as a pragmatic educator, have I effectively prepared them for that through what's happening at the school? So we're always scaffolding from known to unknown, right? And the honest answer is, pointing the finger at Steve Davis, is I haven't prepared those students in the popular vernacular enough for them to be successful in their next life. So we should, why am I not doing a pops concert? If the brass face is a different experience playing a pops concert than playing the Schoenberg Chamber Symphony is, and if they're getting degrees and wanting to do this, then maybe I should consider doing more of that as well, or playing programs that are like that. So it's, there's 1,000 variables, maybe forms, maybe tonal centers, maybe different orchestrations. I mean, history, tomorrow, nations, people, you know, it's so, to be honest, it can become debilitating and overwhelming. And it's something that I enjoy and loathe simultaneously. Gary Green said, every piece, one time he had like 5 years left at Miami, he goes, every piece I'm choosing is a piece that I'm not choosing. And it may be the last time I get to conduct it. So that, I remember that conversation with Gary vividly, and it has resonated in my brain forever. So sorry for the long-windedness. It's a tricky wicket.
Boy, what a good thing to keep in mind. Everyone you're choosing means you're one you're not choosing. I mean, that's true in our friendships. That's true in our jobs. That's true in our music. That's true in our marriages. I mean, there's so many applications. Thank you for that. Okay, let's move on to score study, because that's a big thing that I think folks are wanting to get some nuggets of wisdom out of here. First of all, I do want to thank Andrew Putnam has sent me that form, or the document that Steve mentioned. I will include that in the recap either later today or tomorrow, whenever you get the email that has the recap, including the recording. I also want to say thank you to Dan Harbaugh. Dan is at University of Oklahoma right now, working on a DMA, I believe, is what he's doing. He sent me some documents that he's passed on to the Towner, the Ostling, and the Gilbert study. So you should all have those in the chat. And we should have the YouTube playlist from Isaac Brinberg, which is the part 1 of the study. You should have a Google sheet from David Rausch with the Towner list that way. So thank you all for sharing that. It's wonderful to be disseminating that information in so many different ways. Okay, so moving on to score study. Everyone has their own process. I'm always curious to know what the process is of others, and how do you learn? You know, do you use colors? Do you use time frames? What is your kind of method? If you were handed a new piece, what are you going to do? What are your steps? Steve, I think you need to start this time, right? Yeah, I think it's time for Steve to start one, right?
You're fine. I don't have a set in stone process, because I think every piece is different from every other piece. I will tell you something that I'll go to the grave believing, and if I don't want to start a war over this, but I was raised to not listen to pieces of music that were performing, because, you know, somehow it would become a copied replication of that. And I just don't believe it. You're never going to find a profoundly successful any conductor that hasn't listened to Mahler 5 100 times. So I think if music's an oral art form, I think we can listen and listen and listen and wear out our listening to the pieces that we're performing. Having stated that, if I'm going to perform the whole suite or any piece, I'm going to try to seek out 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 20, 30, 50 recordings of them and just listen to them. Again, just objectifying. And I'll never forget, I listened to the first suite, I don't know, this is 10 years ago, and I was listening to Royal Northern play it with Tim Rinish conducting it. And all of a sudden these bum, 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 bum were really accented in the march. And I was like, wow, what in the world? And I went to my score, I ran and got my score and I opened it up. And sure enough, on those notes, there are accents on every single one of them. And most recordings that you hear, they're not performed in an accented way. They're performed as the same of the rest of the piece, of the rest of the notes. And I was like, okay, fine, you sold me. Holst wrote it, you eliminated it. I hadn't thought of it before in that way. Now it's part of me only because I listen. So I listen a lot. I think then we can go through the list of 3,000 variables. I mean, pitch, rhythm, time, harmony, orchestration, chamber music, fine. So we have all the objective possibilities of a piece. Then I think about Gunther Schuller's 7 ears, harmony, line, orchestration, and then I think about what's the balance of, is this a phrase where harmony needs to really be illuminated? Is this a phrase that really has expressive possibilities, that the shaping of this, is this a phrase that has a ending that could be earth-shatteringly beautiful and sensitive, and what are the ways that we can exploit that in ways that can draw audience members in, and our players in as well. So here's the last thing I'm going to say on this, and then Jerry can add 100,000 other things. When you don't know it well enough, and getting to know the composer is not for nothing. It's very important. When I observe Holst as a person, or when I observe John Mackey as a person, or when I observe Jennifer Jolly as a person, or when I have dinner with Jennifer Higdon, and I get to know them, there's no way that music making does not get influenced. And that is study. So that's something that we can all add even more to. So besides the formal aspects of studying a score. Jerry?
Great.
Yeah, no, I think that's all great. And I like Steve. I will say that up until a few years ago, when I would talk about score study, I would describe a process that I did adhere to, which over time I realized I wasn't doing anymore. You know, and that's not to say I don't study. I study like now all the time, but it's in a different kind of way because every piece is different. And so there are different scores that need different things for my understanding. So yeah, I just, what I'm trying to do is not memorize. That's not the goal. If it happens, but here's my standard for that. I used to attempt, when in my youth, I used to try to conduct everything from memory. And I realized that the reason I was doing that was in order to be impressive, because I had seen people do that and I was impressed. And so I wanted to be impressive, but that didn't have anything to do with anything. And I also realized that learning music in that way was pretty superficial. I was skimming the surface of things, just getting through meters, and it was sort of surviving it was the goal. And that wasn't working. So I realized after a while that if I know a piece well enough to where I can get us out of trouble if something happens, then I'll conduct it from memory. But otherwise, I'm going to have a score there. So I'm not one of these people who says you have to conduct everything from memory or don't ever conduct from memory. It's just if it feels right and if you can conduct better doing it, then that's great. What I like to be concerned with earlier on in the process, in whatever the process is than I used to, is to be thinking about the quality of sound that I can imagine. Whatever it is on this page is telling me something about the quality of sound, which goes way beyond, yeah, I want it to be in tune, or yeah, I want it to be soft. Well, how soft is soft? But is it a vaporous sort of emergence out of the background of silence, or does it have a clear start to it? Does it have a little bit of growth after an initial attack? I try to think in those sort of terms rather than just the hard and fast, it's kind of the data-driven approach to it. So I want to know what the atmosphere of the piece is so that I can somehow communicate that. That's all I'll say about it.
Gentlemen, let me ask you to reframe this a little bit. And if think about it from when I was a private student, or when I was studying my saxophone, I was at one time told, here's how you can structure a successful practice session, an efficient practice session. Here's how much long tone time, scale time, yada, yada, yada. For me, that was mind blowing at the time because I'd never structured before. Right. And that allowed me to be more efficient in my practice techniques and allowed me to achieve greater success. Is there a formula that you would share with others that you would say, if you don't know how to score study, here's a way you can take half an hour and do something?
I would piggyback on this. If you want, Kevin No, who's my colleague at the conservatory, does one of the greatest sessions on score study he's done it all over the country numerous times. So I would reach out to him. We all have our list. The Frank Battisti Guide to Score Study gives a nice underpinning of some possibilities in how to study score. There's Jerry. When Jerry was talking, I thought about something that's very, very important that I didn't mention. I'll give you an example. 3 years ago, Chicago Symphony came into town and they were playing in the Kaufman Center and they were playing a Mahler symphony, and they played, and I had never, ever, and Muti was conducting, I had never heard an orchestra play so softly in my life. And I'm 100% positive that it could not have been fun for the ensemble. It was that soft. And I just had to sit there and think about the relentlessness and the requests to get it that soft over the rehearsal time must have been really committed and profound. But it also achieved buy-in. So that was pianissimo that I was hearing in a large ensemble for the very first time of my life, and I was 48 years old. Like really hearing an ensemble pianissimo. There's no way that once that aural experience happened, I went through a door of learning. It now became part of my infrastructure. So now when I go into wind symphony rehearsals and I want a pianissimo illuminated, then on the scale of 1 to 10 dynamics, we've been getting it down to like a 3. Well, we've got to really explore tablatos 1 and 2 in here so we can really feel, taste, touch. Another awesome opportunity for a person in the audience. Why is that important? All of those opportunities, when I look at a score and I see pianissimo and it's orchestrated in a similar way to Mahler's 5th section of 3rd movement or whatever it is, now I know how that can go. But if I didn't know that, so my experience listening to aural examples of high artistic excellence, it could be a yo-yo doing a release, it could be whatever. As soon as you have those unlocked in yourself, then you can apply it to the score and they can go into the score. But any kind of experience that we haven't had can't go into the score. So the more listening we can do, the more bumping elbows with the highest level of achieving artists on the planet, then that can become part of who we are. And then our ensembles become more expressive, more musical, more connected, more passionate, more all the things that we want. So, but you have to fill your cup or else you don't have anything to pour. So that would be the last part of score study that I would want to make sure everybody is aware of.
You have to fill your cup, otherwise you don't have anything else to pour. Wonderful. I like that. Charlie Parker's statement about if you don't live it, it won't come out of your horn. Pretty important in this, right? Okay, guys, thank you so much for that. I appreciate the practical ideas there too. And a few folks have sent me some book names, and I put those in the chat for you to check out. I did put the Frank Battisti book in there, Guide to Score Study for the Wind Band Conductor. And then we've got another one that was suggested, the Gary Stith Guide to Score Study and Rehearsal Preparation. So those are some basic ways to get started. Okay, let's.
One other book, which is unfortunately out of print now, but you can find it at a used bookstore or online if you don't have it, or if it's not in a library, called A Season with Schulte by William Barry Furlong, which he was a sports writer for Sports Illustrated, but it's about the Chicago Symphony back in whatever that was, 1971 or something like that, Sir George Schulte's first year. But there's a full chapter devoted to Schulte's study process, which actually influenced my study process a long time ago. And what Schulte was a notoriously slow learner, but once he had something, man, he had it. And here's a person who made his career doing Wagner operas, etc. So he could tackle big pieces. So this was a Ruggles, Men and Mountains, I believe, was the piece that they were doing, which the CSO had never played. But it's a fascinating discussion of his study process. So I would mention that one as well.
Perfect. I just typed that and with a correction into the chat. Season with Schulte, and it is looks like you can probably find that on Amazon. I'm just looking that up right now. William Barry Furlong. So there are some ways you can still access that book. Okay, great. Gentlemen, I'm going to give you the option here. Do you want to go into philosophical questions or your influencers? We've been talking a lot about influences.
I think that we can go into philosophical, I think. Sure. I don't know if Jerry's cool with that.
Yeah. That's good.
Jerry sounds good. Okay. Thank you so much for your time.
I think they become one of the same in a weird way.
Indeed.
Yeah, they intersect.
By looking back, we can look forward, right? I want to say thank you, first of all, to Charles Pizzara, who's on the call right now. Charles is the band director in Union High School in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We would not be able to host a session this large without Charles offering his Zoom account to us to be able to do that. Thank you so much, Charles. Very much appreciate that. We had nearly 200 people on the call earlier, and about 50 have had to leave to go to meetings, it looks like. Okay. Sorry, let me just glance through these, which one to start with, because we're having to pick and choose. Okay. What is happening in music education elsewhere in the world that we should adopt into our own teaching and culture? I know you both teach elsewhere. You both teach around the world. What are some things that you see that we should adopt? Barry, you want to start?
Sure. I don't know that there's anything that I see that we should adopt, because every situation is different, so the situation in Japan, which is so attractive to us in the US because we hear and see the final performance product very often, but it's not without its own real quirks, and I don't know that, and it's a completely different system, as it is in Hong Kong, as it is in so many places throughout the world, not just in Asia, but their teaching method is a British model, European model, where music is not a part of the school day. It's after school, it's on the weekends, extracurricular. And in Japan and similar places, in Japan especially, you make a choice. You are going to be in band, and then you don't do anything. That is your extracurricular activity. So you're not also on the soccer team. You're not on the debate team or whatever. You're specializing at an early age. However, having said that, there are two things in Japan. There's an appreciation for teachers and for learning that we don't necessarily see in the US. The first time I conducted at a school in Japan, we got to the end of the rehearsal, and this was with advanced university students. So we got to the end of rehearsal. I, thanked everyone, see you tomorrow. And I wasn't prepped for this. So the entire group stood up and they said something really fast in Japanese and everyone bowed. And so I didn't know, I was a little uncomfortable because I didn't know how I was supposed to respond to this, if there was something I was now supposed to say. So I turned to the translator and said, what just happened? Am I supposed to do something? He said, oh, no. This is the way every class in Japan ends, from the time you begin school until you finish. And they just said, thank you for teaching us today. So, I thought, wow, that's the first time in my career I've ever heard that, so now it's all very regimented. It becomes, ingrained there, but there is this appreciation for school and for learning and for education. That's really wonderful to see. I wish we could translate that into our situation, but, cultures are different. That's why I say, I don't know that there's anything as far as teaching practices. They're doing what we're doing. They just do it maybe in a very methodical and very focused, and take longer actually to prepare music than we would take sometimes. So I don't know that there's anything we need to steal, but I just, I think being aware of these things is helpful. I'll just leave it at that.
Perfect. Great. Steve, what do you have to add to that?
Briefly, when I travel to Australia, and I've been there a few times now, I'm going to give you some stereotypes that I observe, and I hate stereotypes, but because of this question, I'm going to try to say some things I wish we could steal. The average kid in Australia can speak more about composers and history and intelligently about the art form than the stereotypical kid in an American band program. I have just witnessed that. Given that same thing, the stereotypical band program in North America might play at a higher level than some of those groups in Australia. Not all of them, but the Australia system has more of a whole music approach, less hits in ensemble music class. We have more ensemble music class, less on the whole music approach. I wish we could find the intersection of the two and balance those. My time in Portugal, the students move more organically while they're playing than the students do in America, just as, again, just an average mean of the equation. I don't know if that's because of the outdoor activity here becoming part of, or the military background of the wind band, but they're part of most everyone's process in going through music education programs is the expectation to play with your body still. And when you are taught to play with your body still, then the organic possibilities of playing your instrument are being exercised out. So you have to be really careful how we do that here. So something just to consider there. The thing that my time in Austria and Germany, I was on a bus with a bunch of ensemble members, and we were driving down the road, and a Strauss tone poem came on, and the bus driver started singing it, and the people on the street started singing it. And could that happen in our country? Sure. Does it? Not very often. That would be a surprising elbowing into something here. So those are some things that just pop out. And Jerry speaks so beautifully about the Japanese aspect of that. Everywhere's a little bit different, and I think that we can learn from all of those things.
I always think back when our daughter was in high school band. They changed directors after she had been 3 years at this high school, which is a very good high school. And her senior year, Bruce Dinkins, rest his soul, became the band director at this school. And what was a good high school band before became something very different. And in Bruce's first year, I remember going over and working with his band, and there were kids before rehearsal started in violent arguments with each other about whether Bernard Haitink's recording of the Shostakovich Fifth Symphony, which is what they were performing in band, was better than that first Bernstein recording with the New York Philharmonic, or whether, you know, and there were people who were like, it was like pushing, you know, going on because they were so involved in it to think that would not have happened at all in the year before. And so it just sort of reinforced that notion. It's all about the teacher, you know, so that a teacher, a great teacher can do that, you know, and so how the students become inspired and just for this love of music that in just a few months, he was able to transform that situation that way.
A great story. Physical violence over the version that they liked.
High school kids.
That's fun. Okay, gentlemen, how do you think composers will continue to push the envelope in wind band literature? Are there new compositional styles you would like to see in a new work? You want to start, Jerry?
Yeah, first of all, there's never been a better time to be a band conductor, you know, even in the midst of COVID-19, you know, and I know there'll probably be questions about that later on, but the repertoire is just exploding. And there are more, first of all, highly regarded, universally regarded composers who have an interest in composing for wind band than there ever has been. Now, the question is, so what new techniques, I think, you know, we're on the verge of a big new era for electroacoustic music combined with winds, and not necessarily just at the most advanced levels either. And interestingly enough, one side effect of COVID-19 and everyone being sequestered and everyone being, you know, living our lives now on Zoom, a word which 6 weeks ago I had never heard of, and now it's undo withoutable. But as you know, there is no synchronous way to make music. But there will be, you know, as a result of this, that's going to happen. Now, will that replace in any way person to person being in the same room in the same space? No, of course not. But yet that's going to be a dimension that we will have at our disposal, which we've never had before, because now all of it is asynchronous, you know? So I do think that it will perhaps empower us to make music live with our ensembles in a room when we get on the other side of this, but then interact in a masterclass situation with Joe Alessi playing in real time or something like that, or having a composer be able to play at the piano while someone is playing to show them exactly what they meant. I think things are going to be opened up, but also electroacoustic challenges are going to be overcome. So I think this is all something that, you know, we're headed toward. And the great thing about music is none of us know how it's going to end up. You know, I'm not a soothsayer. Every time I make a prediction, it turns out not to work. But I think that, you know, over time, it's only going to become more exciting. That's all. I'll just stop with that.
Who knows what will come out of this time, huh? So much creativity has already been coming forth. It's going to be wonderful. Steve, go ahead.
I would just say silos are not good for the advancement of all the arts, meaning band specific, choir specific, orchestra specific, theater specific. I think anytime, and I've spent a lot of my life working on projects. Some people like them, some people don't, but I have tried to merge the arts to have opportunities to be together, dancers and wind ensembles, theater actors and wind ensembles, visual artists and wind ensembles, exotic bird society and wind ensemble, astronomers and wind ensemble, whatever. There's 1,000 ways that we can increase our audience, so we start to have more of an impact in the whole music world rather than our just very specific narrow lane, which feels good if you're in the lane and you're talking to only people in the lane. But I'm not certain that our generation of students, I respect my students so much in their want to impact the world. They want to have a footprint on a better world. So the more people that we can get into our swimming in our current, then we actually can impact the world, instead of just our little narrow living in our vacuum. So I spend a lot of time on that. And when I work with Gary Abbott at the conservatory, or Sabrina Madison Cannon that used to be at the conservatory, she's now the dean at University of Oregon. When I work with those people, those were both dancers that I'm speaking about. When I work with both of those people and I watch their brains in action, it definitely increases my sphere of emotional and expressive possibilities. So and it does for our students too. And it helps new friendships happen. So all of a sudden our Wind Symphony kids are becoming friends with this 60, 70, 80 dancers that we have at the conservatory. And then they get in the class together, and then they start to think about something that they can do together, and then the snowball rolls. But if we don't cross-pollinate some, then we're only really preaching to ourselves. And something about that doesn't resonate fully to me. So whatever that's worth.
Guys, what I'm really enjoying. Oh, go ahead, Jerry. Sorry.
I was just going to mention, for me, a further extension of this, this is happy news, but Steve alluded to this earlier. We're not there. We're not where we need to be on this. But I scrolled through a moment ago to see who was joining us on the chat. And it's so great now when you see a female band conductor, that's, you don't immediately think, oh, well, that's an oddity, or something like that. Whereas 20 years ago, you might have, because that number was so small. But, and so it's always about opportunity, about representation, for everything. And so I think about what has happened just in the last 3 to 5 years. Not that there have not been African-American composers before, but you look at the impact that my new colleague, Omar Thomas, has had on our medium. And now there are going to be young African-American children, male or female, it doesn't matter, who are sitting in an ensemble who actually have an opportunity to imagine that they could do this. I think that is a very important thing. And so diversity in our profession is important, and we're not diverse, but we're inching toward more diversity. But I think now we're going to have an exponential rise over the course of the next 10 to 15 years. It's going to be really exciting to watch.
Fantastic. Yeah, representation is so crucial, isn't it? So crucial. What my favorite thing, gentlemen, is that every question, without a doubt, no matter what topic we're talking about, what aspect of conducting we're talking about, both of you bring that back to the humanity of your art form, of our art form. You have tied in your students, you have tied in connection with the rest of the world, you have tied in your personal histories. And I think that those of us who are listening today just need to be heartened by the fact that we all have this inside of us to be successful and to share that love with others and to be genuine and to be, we all have that. I'm not going to connect with my students the way that Steve and Jerry do. Jerry doesn't connect in the same way with students that Steve does, and vice versa. So if you're looking for a magic answer by listening today, I think maybe our magic answer that we're coming out of this is just be more human. Is that a fair statement? Just be more true to yourself.
As a wise person once told me, that, if you have someone that you admire, you need to keep in mind the fact that you can only duplicate the mannerisms of that person. You can't duplicate the substance, because the substance is you. So you have to be that, provide that substance. And it has to be all about you, not about you trying to be someone else, so we all have to find that for ourselves, I think.
Amen. Well, I think we probably better wrap this up maybe another 5 minutes or so, just to out of respect for the two of your time and everybody else that's on the call. It's been so wonderful. We have some folks who are very interested in graduate study with you too, and with folks around the country. And the questions that they were putting forth were trying to help themselves be separated from others in the application process. So I'm just going to throw a few of these out here, and you can speak to what it is you might be looking for. There's 3 different questions. What do you look for in a graduate conducting student? When looking into prospective DMA students, what are things you look for, and how can I make my application strong and unique? And when sifting through applications for people wanting to attend a conducting symposium, what makes some candidates better than others? So people are looking to stand out. Do you have any tips?
You want to
Steve,
go, Jerry? Me or you,
I-
Jerry?
I think Jerry's
Go.
go first.
Okay, whatever. So, we have, what's the best way to say this? I'm really fortunate, we're fortunate that we get a lot of interest in our graduate program. And so, I'll just tell you the numbers because it's remarkable that every year it always kind of fits the same thing. So we always start with anywhere from 60 to 70 inquiries. And then that filters down to probably this year, but and usually it's between 40 and 50 applications. And so we're actual applications. And so we're evaluating those. And then we will choose to bring whatever the number is, depending on how many openings we have, from 1 to 5 or 6 people to campus, usually for the 1 or 2 spots that we have that year. So it's an involved process. So the question, how do I stand out? That's difficult. The one thing I would say to everyone is I have a personal rule. I'm not going to accept anyone who has gone straight through degrees. I want someone to have had a position of some sort, as an educator in a professional way, even if you've been a church choir director or something where you have had to produce something over it, because we don't have time working on it, especially a doctorate, to teach someone how to teach. You already have to know that because you're going to have a role as a teaching assistant. But the other thing is, I want to assure people that we know how to evaluate something when your band that you're working with currently maybe can't play that well. But I think people should be self-aware enough to know when they're submitting an application that we don't need to see the announcements at the beginning of rehearsal. We don't need to see the office assistant coming in and bringing the pink slip because someone has to come out of rehearsal to go to the office. We don't need to see the warm-up because that's not what a conducting degree is about. But what we want to see is, it doesn't have to be for us any more than 10 minutes. We just want to see you rehearsing, doing your thing, teaching. And I don't care if it's the second middle school band, wherever. What I'm looking for is I want to see a conductor who can stimulate a group of students sitting in front of them. And I also want to see that group of students respond to the stimulus that the conductor is providing. If those two things happen, then that's very interesting for me. So I would say also just take care with the appearance of your application, because that says to me that you're a careful person. Mm-hmm. If your statement of intent says, I'm very interested in attending the University of Texas to get my master's degree. And then as you read the statement, it all sounds pretty good. And then you get to the end of it and it says, so I certainly hope that you will consider my application for the University of Missouri at Kansas City. Oh. Because they didn't, because they're using the same statement, they're using the same materials everywhere, and they weren't careful enough to correct it, so that just tells you something. Absolutely. So you have to be careful. Details matter. Details matter on an application, just like they're going to matter when you're in school doing some work. A former colleague of mine used to say, because someone asked this question, we were at a dinner, well, how do you select your the students who are in your conducting program? And this person piped up and said, it's really easy. Jerry just has them come into Austin and he takes them down the town lake, and the first one who can walk across, they get in. So, and it's not at all like that. So people don't have to be Carlos Kleiber, or Herbert von Karajan or, Marin Alsop to get into the program. But what we have to see is a spark, someone who has that spark, can communicate it, and is an organized thinker.
Wonderful. Okay, very clearly stated. Thank you, Jerry. Steve, how about you? What do you look for?
Oh, all of the things Jerry mentioned and more. I find this fascinating. And Jerry and Mallory.
Do you think you asked for more? What?
That's not what I meant. Jerry and Mallory and myself and Kevin and Jamie and on and on and on we go. and we have many students that apply for the same schools, and I'm always fascinated why X person advanced Y person, and what I didn't see in them to not advance them, and why someone I valued that they didn't see and didn't advance them when they apply. And that happens all the time. It happened this year specifically a lot. And we're all looking for different things, but we all are putting them through a filter of evaluation, right? And some of the things that I evaluate here are the collective in the studio. So I carry 3 students in the studio, and I think about how the 3 of them are going to interface, and what does X person need that Y person brings, so that when these people really spend hours and hours and live together, essentially, what are they going to learn from each other? In addition to what are they going to learn from Joe? What are they going to learn from I? What are they going to learn from the other peers in the ensemble and their students? What are they going to bring? What viewpoint might they have? Next year we have someone coming from Canada. I have someone coming from Puerto Rico, and someone that's coming from an urban school district outside of Memphis where they grew up. This is very different than 3 people from a suburb of one city. And I think that's also important for each other and for the community. Likability, teachability. When I work with them, do they change? Do they value a proactive want of, getting better? There's all kinds of things in addition to everything Jerry said. I will also say it's terribly gut-wrenching for me. And it's honestly not something I enjoy very much, because there's people that want to put their future in some way with me. And to deny that want is not fun. And I wish I had the ability to have 30 assistantships at school, but we don't. So I have to make some very hard decisions, and it most of the time breaks my heart, just to be frank.
Steve, the coachable and teachable aspect of things, you brought that up in Tuesday's session as well, about how to get a student ready for their music audition. You remember talking about that? I think that's something you brought up there. So folks that are thinking, if you missed the Tuesday session and you're thinking, how do I help my students get ready for their audition for college, you might want to key in on that. Are they teachable? Are they coachable? And you know that about them, but will the person that's going to work with them in their audition see that? Will Professor Davis or Professor Junkin see that in your audition for your DMA? Jerry, you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, for us, and I found that over the years, that the interview part of the actual, them being on campus, I mean, the one-on-one or me and my colleagues having the interview with that becomes almost more important than the conducting, because when we get to this point, everybody's going to conduct relatively well. They can conduct, and they have to have technique, all those things that you don't want to spend any time on, when they're working on the DMA or a master's degree. But what has to come through is that they have humility and that they're a nice person. So if I get the impression that they are lacking in humility, because we all have to have it, and we all have egos, but if their ego is out of balance, then it's not going to work. Because as Steve said, it's so important for them to fit into a culture that has long been established, and which all of our students are carefully carrying on. I don't want to upset that. I'll do everything to protect it.
Yeah.
Wonderful thoughts, guys. To wrap things up, let's do 2 more questions, and then let's call it good there, because you've given us so much of your time and so much of your expertise. We really, really appreciate it. So we'll end it with some light questions here. What was your greatest mistake as a young conductor? what did it teach you that you now appreciate? You want to share a story that you forgot to bring your pants to the concert, or something maybe more serious than that?
There are so many screw ups, over the years that I'll tell you my first big one. So that was, I was relating this to some people in another one of these sessions a couple of days ago, but I well remember my first year at UT the first time. I had just finished a master's degree. I was the assistant director of the marching band, and part of the rest of my job was I was conducting at the second concert band, the symphonic band it was called at that time, which I loved. I mean, and that's part of why I'm still doing this. I was getting the itch so much. And so the first concert that we did, I did music on that concert that was somewhat, in some cases, unfamiliar, but I wanted this concert to be good. And it was. The group played well, and it was a very nice response from faculty and from students and all of that. And so, the concert was probably on a Friday or whatever. So on Monday, I'm sitting in my office, or maybe the concert was on Wednesday and this was Friday, and the librarian knocks on my door and says, hey, just curious, I don't have anything for you for folders for this. So I know you don't have a rehearsal today, but you've got one on Monday. So, or did you put the folder? Did you have someone else do it? And I was like, I had not thought 1 second past that performance. I had no idea what was going to be on the next concert. Hadn't thought about it. And which is a terrible rookie mistake. And back in those days, I will say, we didn't publish the entire season ahead of time. We just would sort of go from concert to concert. But so not only had I not picked the program, I hadn't prepared any music. It was terrible. I mean, this is a mistake that's just like impossible to make. How could anybody make that mistake? But I was so focused on that one performance that I just totally blew it. And I've got countless others. My tuxedo pants slipped off of the bar as I'm walking from the hotel to a concert venue one time. I mean, there's a million things like that, but I won't bore you with that. But that was a bad one because that was on me, and I learned a lot after that.
No doubt. So planning ahead. Wonderful. Steve, what about you?
Oh, there's countless ones, as Jerry mentioned. I'll give you 2 quick ones. They both happened when I taught at Michigan. And one was I just screwed up. And we were conducting a piece by Leslie Bassett, who was on the faculty and living at the time. And I did a piece. I don't remember if it was colors and contours or designs, images and textures. It was, or sound shapes and symbols. I don't remember which one it was, to be honest. But I do remember vividly messing up. And the group seemingly falling apart on stage. And I walked off the concert that night at Hill, and I went backstage, and I was like, oh my gosh, that was the worst thing. And Bob was there, Reynolds again. And I said, oh my God, Bob, that was the worst thing on the planet ever shared with in this hall. And he goes, Steve, it won't be the last time. Meaning you're gonna screw up again. And then I went back and listened to the tape, and we've all can share this. I went back and listened to the performance of the piece, and it was devastatingly bad for about 7 seconds. And the piece is 20 minutes long. So give me a break, right? I mean, come on, get over yourselves already, me. Apparel-wise, I'll give you one, same place. It was the day before a concert, and I had taken my tuxedos into the dry cleaner. And I went to pick it up on Friday afternoon for a Friday night concert, and they lost the tuxedo. I had 2 tuxedos, and I had them both being cleaned at the same time. So this was like 4:30, and I'm 6'7", those of you that don't know me, and I'm not an easy person to fit. So I started thinking about, I had a pair of black pants. I did not have a jacket that was long enough. A soloist that night was going to be David Jackson playing the Kelly trombone concertino. But the only person that I could think that had long arms was X person. And they said, we're texting them about, not texting, I guess we called them because it was before the time of text, but we said, can Steve, someone was doing it for me, can Steve borrow your jacket? So his wife brought the jacket to me at like 7:58. And I put it on and it fits, and I'm nervous. I'm in the back of the room, finally get the jacket. I'm getting ready to go on stage. I go on stage, I start to conduct, and I've got my baton, and I'm realizing as I'm conducting this opener, this right sleeve is getting longer and 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 longer, and it's unhemmed.
No way.
And I have no idea why it's unhemmed, but I'm conducting the whole first piece, and the jacket went out almost to the tip of the baton, 15 and a half inch, 16-inch baton. And so I stopped using my right arm and trying to use my left arm. It was a fiasco. Having stated that, I now vividly know what I'm going to be wearing for whatever I'm going to conduct at least 48 hours in advance. And it's sitting somewhere that I know where it is. So
wow.
Lesson learned.
I love that both of your stories are about planning ahead. Oh man, I won't tell you the story about the time that I wore my wife's pants to a performance accidentally. Okay, so if you could, this is the final one we're gonna do. If you could have lunch with one conductor, living or dead, who would it be?
Conductor, did you say?
Yes, one conductor, living or dead. You're gonna have lunch with them. You can have breakfast with them if you want. You can have a brunch. I'll give you time to think. Well, I'm stalling here. You can have a dinner, drinks afterwards. Who you got? Who's your idol? Living or dead? One of them.
Well, for me, I can't narrow it down to, but it would either be Leonard Bernstein, who I met, but I certainly never had a meal with him. And I just think that would be fascinating conversation. And then the other would be Carlos Kleiber, because I would want to know how he did what he did. It's unbelievable what this gentleman did. So, and I'm very sad that I never met Carlos Kleiber, never got to see him, but I've had some interesting conversations with people. Most recently, Mark Gould, who was playing in the Met Orchestra when Kleiber came there, and Billy Hunter, who's going to be our new trumpet teacher, who's the principal trumpet at the Met now, talks about how there are people in the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra who still talk about those performances in 1990, 91, 92. Well, you should have been here when Kleiber did Rosalind Cavalier. That was, so I would love one of those two or both.
Fantastic.
Not at the same time, however.
Not at the same time. Steve, how about you?
This is so redundant. I was, before Jerry spoke, I was thinking it would probably have to be Kleiber or Bernstein, and maybe that's sad that we both think the same thing. The ones that are living, I have been so blessed to be able to have many conversations with many of the greatest living conductors. So that part has been enjoyable, or at least observed, or been in master classes, or been with them and watched the brain in action. So anyone living, I answers your question, someone that's passed away, that's of our past. Yeah, I would. The problem with me saying both Bernstein and Kleiber is I've read all of the books on them. I feel like I have some sort of insight into them already, and I'm trying to think of someone that I don't have insight into that I would like to have spent time with, and nothing is really jumping out to me, but those would be the two that I would say.
Gentlemen, you've given us tremendous insight. Thank you so much. And I want to thank everyone on the call. I want to thank you on behalf of everyone on the call and everyone who's going to watch this recording later who wasn't able to attend today. It's fantastic for us to help share our souls with one another. And the two of you did a tremendous job of being vulnerable this morning and sharing what the insight is into your heart that has helped you achieve what you've achieved and is going to help you continue to achieve and continue to affect lives. So on behalf of everybody, thank you so much. Thank you, Palen Music, for supporting these sessions. Thank you, Charles Pizarra, for allowing us to have this platform. Thank you to everyone who gave us their time today. And Really, really appreciate everybody being on here. So have a beautiful day, everybody. Jerry and Steve. I
Thank
hope to
you.
see you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Brad and Pam.
Be well, everybody.
Bye. Take care.
Stay safe. Wash your hands. Stay inside. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you, Steve.
You're
Great
the
to see you.
bestest. All right, you all have good days, everyone.
Take care, guys.
Steve, I'll see you on Sunday, my friend.
You shall. Looking forward to it, Jerry.
Bye-bye.